Here we go. Good morning, everybody. This is Juan Lee from Clear Journey here with Oliver. Oliver, how are you doing this morning?
I am well, man. I am well. Glad to be back for what I believe will be a enriching conversation. So
All right.
glad to be here.
Well, cool. Hey, before we get started, if you are a first-time visitor, welcome. This is Clear Journey's uh, podcast called It's Life. And we've excited to be here. If this is your first time, hit the like button, subscribe, be a part of our community. That would be great. Today is going to be about self,
Mm,
about self, about what does it take um, to really, what does it mean to be yourself? You know, that's something that I think we all want to be ourselves,
hmm
but today's interesting because what does it mean to be ourselves? I mean, because we're influenced by so much and so many things today.
Yeah,
How do we recognize, if we're being ourselves or not? You know, that's an interesting thought. You got any ideas there?
that's a great question. And it's interesting because I feel like it changes with the generations. I feel like there were generations where you were actually being encouraged to fit into a particular mold, whether it be this is where you need to go to school, you need to go to college after this, you need to do this, you need to do that, and walking that line. And then we saw the opposite extreme where it was like, do what you like, be who you are, do whatever you want, it's you. And so I think there's a middle ground, if you will, of that involves you really understanding who you are. And that probably, as we get into the conversation, will probably be, will be spun up in different ways. But for me, thinking about who I am, that's made up of several components. My family of origin, so who my parents are and who they raised me to be. Uh, some of the outside influences of the neighborhood, some of the influences of media and different things now have all been thrown into this pot. And as I mix it up, I realize, okay, I like this ingredient. I don't like this ingredient. I want to be this type of person. I don't want to be that type of person. And then going through that process has allowed me to come today to be like, yeah, this is me. I'm being myself. I'm being the person that I feel like is authentic. I feel like is the person that should be showing up in every area of life. And so that's tough for a lot of folks because depending on how you grow up, depending on where you grow up, depending on what your circumstances are, sometimes that's actually determined for you. And you can tell because there are people who grapple with that. You can tell the people who it was determined for them because at one point you wake up, proverbially, wake up and say, man, I don't know if this is really me.
Yeah, I mean that's really the thing. And you brought up a real good, interesting example there. And we talked about as early about the influences,
Mm-hmm.
the things that influence us. And it's that ability to be able to find your originality. I look back in my life and I've shared this before. Um, Up until I was 18 years old, I had no identity, and that which I did have was very poor. I had low self-esteem. I had no identity other than that which was what somebody else told me I was.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, everybody up until then, 18, you're going through high school and you graduate. I was in special education, and from that perspective, I felt like I was unprepared for life. I felt that I was less than. I didn't get an opportunity to, I did some things in my junior and senior year in high school because I was in special education. I took the normal courses, but I took them as a no grade, as pass. It was just like no grade. I wanted to be exposed to things that they were not exposing me to in that special education track. And I was like, how do I begin to find out who I am being exposed to nothing, being, not being prepared for anything? And so, we get caught into, just trying to make it through, move on, just to make it through. And every stage of life has a purpose.
It does.
Every stage of life has a purpose. And when you fail to recognize or to fulfill that purpose, it affects the next purpose, the next stage of your life. It affects the next stage of your life. And the thing about it is many of us don't even recognize that we've been influenced or have been affected by that which we did not be understood and understand what we had gone through.
I agree.
And so that's how subtle influence is. It's influencing us in what we don't know and what we do know.
Yeah.
And so we're ending up in this situation like, where do we begin to identify who we really are? Because have we really gained and gathered all of the things that will influence us in a way in which we can express exactly our authentic selves? Some people, we get caught up into the situation where we become a product of our experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in many cases, you don't have a choice. That's it.
It's part of the survival process.
And see, and that's where you begin to miss out on your authenticity because you're having to survive rather than thrive. See, there's a difference there. And many of us, and that was one of the things that I was struggling with was like, I'm going into the military just to survive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was my whole mindset, just to survive. When I got there, something totally different changing. And it was begin to find my own personal identity. Mm-hmm. Find out who I was, what I had to offer, and it was unique. It was an originality. In a biggest organization like the military, the United States military, I find my personal identity. And that's different from just being subject to. And I think that's the thing that I took away from my experience is how do I fit in with who I am, my authenticity, mm-hmm. instead of trying to fit in to get along.
That's good. I mean, man, sometimes we find our identity in circumstance. So, as you found yourself in the military, that jump started the process of you seeing who you are and bringing out the originality in your identity. I think the thing that we have to really we really have to convey to younger generations is something that you said, that every stage in life has a purpose. And that's not always conveyed. And so we go through, and I speak for myself, go through stages of life, not realizing it's a stage of life, but knowing that it's whatever's happening now is not really what I would like to happen. So maybe looking for a way to shortchange that, or to get out of it, or to skip it, or to whatever. And then realizing, for me in particular, realizing not until I got into the throes of what I understood my purpose to be, realizing that all of that other stuff is very significant to what's happening right now in my life. And we just have to do, I feel like have to do a better job of conveying that to folk, that there is some uh there is there is some value in the process, because it will be significantly aligned to that wake up moment that you have, wherever that wake up moment may be, and whatever circumstance that may prompt that wake up moment. It's all, you're going to be able to point back to something in every stage of your life. And so that's important that you said that, man, because I am a living witness. I am a great example of not recognizing that until later on in life, and then looking back and saying, "Oh, wow, man, that's crazy. The thing that I hated the most about this part of my college career, and those disappointments and all that kind of stuff, man, that's what that's necessary and significant right now. Who, man, if somebody had just told me that, maybe I could have navigated it differently, and maybe not, right? Maybe it wasn't supposed to be navigated any differently than it was. But understanding that, I think, is key, is paramount.
Yeah, everybody, and I'm no different. I mean, I'm looking in the rearview mirror in hindsight. I'm being able to say, I knew what I was dealing with. Did I know that the military was going to do for me what it did for me? I had no idea, because I said in my mindset I was just trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I can look back on is that, you know, every one of us has go through the exact same stages in life. And there's stages that, and I allude to this in my book, Love Made Simple. It's talking about, I break it down into categories, into stages, and I go, it's a teenager. I mean, that's really that first point of you beginning to stretch your wings, so to speak, trying to find that independence. I mean, we look at it, and it's interesting, because I can look at where I am right now in my life, and I go, you know, we were looking for that independence, trying to gather that more and more as teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
At that same time, we have to be like a sponge. If we really want to be able to build ourselves up and understand that what we're learning and what we're gaining at that age as teenagers, that it's the foundation
Mm-hmm.
for what we're trying to become. And we don't realize that all the time, because we're so anxious to get out of there. We're trying to get out of being a teenager. We want to be a young adult. We want to be an adult so that we can do for ourselves. And then looking at the examples that we have to emulate, instead of look at it as something to glean from, or pushing back from it, saying, oh, I don't want to be nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
And see, what that does is that gives you a perspective as to what you don't want,
Mm-hmm.
but you still don't know who you are and what you are about.
Right.
A negative doesn't make a positive. You can't run around talking about, look, what I don't want to be, and end up being what you supposed to be.
Right. That's
That
true.
that ain't gonna happen. Intentionality gets you where you want to go, but that takes effort and attention to details. It's a part of the journey.
Right.
Wherever we end up, we didn't get there by accident. And this is no matter wherever we got or we are. It was intentional, whether it was intentional in the sense of I did it by choice,
Mm-hmm.
or I did it by force.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a path to get us where we are.
Indeed.
And as soon as we understand that there is a path, our actions build on themselves. They're like a building blocks. And
Yeah.
when we set one, whether it's good or bad, we only have that to build on unless we knock it down. And that's intentional.
Yeah. And I think many of us go through what we go through in the various stages of our lives because we choose to just continue down the path that's forming, as opposed to making some type of intentional decision. Hey, listen, this path that's forming, I don't know. I don't think this is me. So let me look around, and sometimes we don't do that either out of just the circumstances are just pushing us down that path, and we just don't have the capacity to look around, and then or we just get comfortable, or we just are uncomfortable but don't really know what else is there and haven't taken the time to look, so we just accept whatever's there, which I think causes us to mishandle the stage. I don't know if skip is the right word. I think maybe skip works.
Well, what I'm saying is it, as it relates to skipping it, can you skip it? Because is it okay to skip it? Because if you don't know the intention of it, do we by forfeit skip it because we don't know we've skipped it? Because there's no way to build anything that you want, and the word build means it's a process,
right?
Okay, you can't skip anything and expect for the process to be stable. It's not something's, if it's sort of like building a house and say you're going to skip the walls, you just want to put the roof on. That does not work.
It doesn't work. I don't think that you can skip stages. I think what happens with many of us is that we neglect certain areas of the stage, and you will have to come back to those at some point in your life. So to use your analogy with the house, we may put up the frame, and we may put in the wiring, we may do all that stuff, but we don't put up any sheetrock. But in order for you to live comfortably in that space, at some point you're going to wake up and be like, man, this is not comfortable. It's not aesthetically pleasing. And maybe you could have fixed that 10 years ago, but you chose to just live in this shell for 10 years and then wake up 10 years down the road and like, this is not what I want. You're going to have to now put up sheetrock, which should have happened in a stage that took place 10 years ago. And I think many of us do that in life. You're going to find yourself, if you mishandle, if you mismanage, if you aren't if you aren't participating in life in the way you should be in a particular stage, at some point in your life, you have to revisit that. Or you have to choose to not ever revisit that, and then you're going to get what you get.
Here's the thing, and what you're saying, I agree with you 100%, but how do you know that the sheetrock or the walls haven't been put up if you've not been exposed to the walls? Because I'm be honest with you, people build them all the time and go like, that's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. I can't even identify the fact that there's no walls there, because their experience in that living experience is that wind blow through the house all the time. That's how it works. That's how it rolls. And you don't understand that it could have been prevented with some walls.
Mm-hmm.
But you ain't never seen no walls built up, because walls are what you use to defense against the wind and the cold and the elements. Or you could use as it relates to your relationships. When they begin to be, when the storms come, you got walls up to be able to shield you from them.
Right.
But you've never seen any shielding going on.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, this is acceptable.
Yeah.
So what I'm suggesting, and I said, where do we get that understanding? How do we come to the point where we feel that if we got a roof on the house, it's okay, irrespective of not having walls? We can't.
We can't. And it actually challenges two different segments of the population. It challenges those who have gone through the process and understand what's necessary at the various stages of life. it challenges them to now be a conduit for the person who lacks exposure. It also is a challenge for the person who isn't sure, hasn't seen, doesn't have an idea to look for that, to search for that.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to start encouraging both sides of that spectrum to do that. You know, as I go through the stages of my life, there's some things I don't know. Maybe I'm the inner city kid. All I know is what's around my in my neighborhood. Everybody kind of walks a couple different paths. You got the drug dealer, you got the, you know, the occasional ball player who kind of broke through the ceiling. You know, you got, you know, the you got the pseudo rapper who's kind of he's real nice in the neighborhood, but he's not on BET. Then you got the guy who might be the next town over. You don't really know him, but he is on BET. So all you have are different ways. So I'm like, okay, this looks like the path. So from the things that I see, I forge what I think the path is. And those folk need to be exposed to the fact that they have options.
That's key. That's really key because options, exposure and options
Mm-hmm.
are exactly what the answer is. Um, and I think when you bring up our circumstances, our situations,
Mm-hmm.
our perspectives, um, the thing that we really have to hone in on is how do we recognize, you know, again, talking about ourselves and our authenticity. You know, your authenticity is that place where you feel at rest,
Mm-hmm.
that place that you feel um, contentment,
Mm-hmm.
feel that you um, are within your abilities and they're yours and they are authentically yours. And so to be able to identify that comes with being able to get exposure to other options
Yeah.
and begin to be able to find. So you've got to understand that peace is where your authenticity lies.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in confusion, it's foggy. That's not where your authenticity is. If you're at fear, if you're in fear, if you're in some type of distress, your authenticity is not there. That's not where you're authentic. Because when you're in your authentic self, there's a resting, a peacefulness that comes over you, that you understand that you know that you know that you know who you are and what you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that ability to find that and recognize that at an early age. And I'm telling you, life is so challenging because as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to find that authentic self because of the distractions that will be presented to you.
Right.
And so it takes a little bit more intentionality to be able to do it. But what we're looking for is to recognize that place of peace and recognize what peace looks like. This is an internal peace. This is not external. This
Mm-hmm.
is not something that somebody can tell you ain't nobody shooting in the neighborhood, so everything is okay. Nuh-uh. It's the fact that you recognize that when you're alone in your own space, do you have that peace? Do you have that ability to be able to not be concerned about what's happening around you, but you're focused on who you are and what it is that brings you that degree of peace? And then you're able to protect it.
Yeah.
You protect that peace because that peace will allow you to navigate whatever is shaking down and around you, no matter what the circumstances are. You can navigate it because you're protecting that peace, and you'll walk down in through the situations of life, maintaining that peace, that
Yeah.
authenticity.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. And it will cause you, and if you don't have that, if you feel like you're grappling with anything, that's an indication that there are other options that you have not been exposed to.
Absolutely.
So often what happens is when we grapple, we kind of get in that frame of mind that, man, this is all I got. I'm grappling with it. I don't see any other way out. So I'm just either going to do something reckless or I'm just going to sit in what I'm already sitting in. And what that should be for those who are listening, who anybody, I talk about the things in my book that I grappled with. That grappling in and of itself is an indication that there's something else. And so what it should cause you to do is begin to start looking around, not to accept it and sit in it and woe is me. And I'm speaking about what I did early on, take the disappointments, craft a badge of honor, and just, this is license for me to act up. If this is going how it's going to be, I'm going to just sit in it and live right in it. That should be an indication for you and a motivator for you to do the exact opposite. Be like, okay, if I'm grappling with this, there's got to be something else. All right, let me start looking around. Let me start asking. Let me start shadowing my future. Let me start figuring out what peace looks like to me. And then let's craft some strategy around how to navigate this stage successfully, knowing that it is directly aligned to whatever comes next.
Yes, and that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So the thing here is knowing yourself is the beginning of this journey. And being able to recognize that you're going to have obstacles. There are going to be challenges. There's going to be things that are going to be thrown against you. But the more you know about yourself, that thing that brings you the greatest degree of we might want to call it happiness, peace, joy, all of those things that you enjoy, that makes you feel, and here's another word that we don't hear a lot, and that's fulfillment.
Yeah.
That thing that really centers us as it relates to, it gives us our identity, that ability to say, okay, I have something that is so unique as my fingerprint, man, that this world needs. It's not to be a follower, it's to be an original.
Right.
And it's that thing that we're after. It's that thing. So that's what we wanted to share today as it relates to, knowing yourself, being able to recognize who you are as an individual, who I am as an individual. And so we charge anyone who's listening that if that's your challenge, if that's where you are, if you haven't heard that soft voice in your ear that says, okay, look, what makes me happy? What is it that I do that I have that no one else has? And I'm going to find that out if I don't know what it is, so that I can be my authentic self.
Yeah. Go for it.
Yeah.
Look around. There are options. The stages mean something. Navigate them well.
And this is the time. Now is the time. We don't know about tomorrow, but now is the time to begin to seek and to search those things that bring out our own personal identity. Yeah. So anything else you want to share today?
I think that's a good place to land the plane. The stages mean something. Navigate them well. The things that you grapple with are an indicator that there are options, because there are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look for your peace. Look for, identify who you are and show up.
Yeah. As your authentic self. So, how can they find you, Oliver?
You can find me everywhere on social media. You can either Google my name, Oliver Marcelle, or you can go to @Denali LLC. That's the handle, @Denali LLC. We'll pull up our social media everywhere. You can also email me, Oliver @Denali, DENOLI.org. Author, speaker, coach in the relationship building and men's empowerment space. Author of the book Overcoming the Man Laws, which is right in line with what we talked about today. In the book, I talk about several things that I grappled with and share my journey of how I walk through the stages. So this is pertinent to today's discussion.
And also, by the way, you can find me at Clear Journey, Juan Lee at clearjourney.org. We're launching a new audiobook of Love Made Simple. You go to Amazon and sign up for Audible, and you get a free copy of my book. Also, I am a thought leader in the power of love, and the attitudes of the power of love. And I'm also having consultations. You can also reach me at Clear Journey for a free consultation about this thing called life. And so also, I'm on all social media. You can find me on Facebook at Juan Lee, the author. But most of all, if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe to our page. We're on YouTube, and we're also on our podcast. So please subscribe.